Howdy y'all, this is Dwight, and welcome back to part 3 of my video series on how I make a basic slip joint pocket knife. I want to get on here and mention real quick that I've done a couple things before I started the video here. The first is I cleaned my holes out because I hadn't did that yet after heat treat. Being where I don't use any heat treat full or nothing like that, stuff builds up in there from the heat treat process. So I went ahead and cleaned those out. Second thing I did was on the liners, again, I used my aluminum plate. I got a chunk of 400 grit there with WD-40, and I smoothed out where I drilled the holes, because I just blast right through it, and my drill bit probably ain't the sharpest no more, so it creates that stuff sticks out. So I smoothed that out on the flat surface. I took the worst off with a bigger bit, but I don't take all of it off, because if you try to get all of it off, you'll end up digging a pivot around, or a divot around that hole. So doing it like that, if I can get the light, it keeps it to where it's still flush, and the liner stays strong that way. So I didn't really think that was worth showing either. That just took a minute or something. Now, in this video, I'm going to attempt to show things a little bit more in depth, because we're going to be getting into getting the pocket knives and the blade and the back spring, all that set up. So the first thing I need to do before I can start is I need to clean the walk of the back spring. As you can see, it's still dirty from where it was in the heat treat process. So I'm going to go over to my belt grinder and clean that up. Okay, we're over here at my belt grinder. I have it in the horizontal position because I like using this big wheel that has the rubber on it. And I used a 1, 2, 3 block to make sure I'm square, because during this process it is important that we have things square at this point. So I'm going to commence to clean this up, and this is a worn 120 grit belt. Okay, I have a very worn 400 grit belt on here now, and that's what I'm going to use to put my walk finish on with. So let's do that real quick. Okay, I have a nice 400 grit finish on my walk now, and if you notice, I did that on a round contact wheel. I did not do that on a flat surface. I have two reasons for that. Keep in mind, this is a basic slip joint pocket knife. This is not nothing fancy like, say, a flush joint. Two main reasons. One, whenever you're setting up a basic slip joint pocket knife, you want 2 points of contact in each, the open, half stop, and the closed positions, which means in the half stop especially, you're going to have a curve. This is not going to be perfectly straight. You're going to have that curved. And the reason why you want 2 points of contact is in case of pocket lint, things of that nature, it has room to go. Okay, reason 2, whenever you put your back spring under tension, it changes the geometry of the back spring. It will not be in this shape no more. It's going to be bent. The center is going to be higher, or the end is going to be lower, however you set your tension, than what this currently is unassembled. So that means your back spring is going to do this number, albeit slightly. Okay, a quick explanation. Okay, you got your liner, you got your blade, and while you're setting it up and it's not under tension, and you get the tip to where it just is hid by the liner, you know, you can't grab it, you know, you can't feel the tip no more. You put it under tension. If that is just barely hid by your liner, your tip is going to come up and do that. You see that? Now I have a real world example right here. Okay, this is something I tried. It's been quite a while back. Okay, it functions good. Now look how it is in the closed position. The tip is higher than the liners. It was not like that before without tension. Without tension, that tip is down flush with the liners. Okay, put it under tension, the back spring, the geometry changed. It is now bent. Okay, so I'm going to leave my case there. Some of you are going to say I'm crazy, say this is terrible. Obviously, you don't want it divoted down, you don't want it rainbowed up, and you don't want it all wiggly all the way across. You want it as smooth as possible. Smooth is different than flat, so I go for smooth. And I eyeball it, it looks straight, that's good enough for me. Okay, now we're going to move on before I waste too much time. I want to turn the phone around. Okay, here's my homemade Rupel jig I made. Honestly, it's pretty janky. Ain't nothing special, but it gets the job done. Okay, now loosen the C-clamp. I can now move these around. So I'm going to go ahead and get my liner fit on here. Okay, now I press it down, make sure it stays flat. I tighten my C-clamp back up. Those don't move no more. I'm ready to have my back spring on there. Now, before I'm ready to put my blade on there, is I'm going to take my pattern, put it on there, see where I'm at, and I'm going to go ahead and scribe around because I am proud, which is what you want. Now bottom's actually a little closer than I prefer, but it's still a little bit proud. So now, I don't know if we're going to be able to see, I've got some scribe lines there. I've got my angle grinder back in the upright position. I of course use my 1, 2, 3 block to make sure I'm good and square. But what I'm wanting to show you real fast is I put an angle in on the edge of my flat platen. That allows me to get in this corner in the open position so much better. Because if necessary, I can tilt it back a little bit, so on and so forth. So that is something I would highly suggest pondering on if you're going to make a slip joint pocket knife. That is very useful. Okay, I realized I failed to save a vital video clip, so I'm going to step in here and explain what we have going on. First, what I did is I checked to see which position read the lowest on the dial indicator. The half stop and the close position read basically the same, and they was the lowest. So I zeroed my dial indicator out to those positions. Actually, the half stop. Because in the open position, I didn't have the open square shaped very much, and the tip of the back spring was still fairly long. So I went ahead and I shaped my back square up to my scribe lines, which still didn't allow the blade to come down very far. It was just under 10 thousandths, I believe. And I trimmed off the tip of the back spring because I like my back spring to be just proud of flush in the half stop position. I think it's aesthetically pleasing if that is very close to the open bottom part of the open notch right there. Okay, and that should get us caught up for our next video clip. Okay, I trimmed the back spring off to where it is just very slightly proud of where the bottom part of the open notch is, and the blade still needs to come up more, which is fine, and that brought us down to just under 10 thousandths. So by the time we get the blade on up where it needs to be, we'll be in the negative, which is right where we want to be. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take material off this part at the spine. Okay, I have the open position basically where I want it now, and as we can see, we are well beneath zero now, so we have plenty of room to work for the half stop and closed position now. I do not have a 400 grit finish on the tip of the back spring or the open notch yet. It's still 120 grit. So looking down the spine, you can tell the blade is still down just slightly. Once I get my 400 grit finish on that, it will raise up some. As well as I'm not wanting a straight spine, I'm wanting a slight curve in it. So for how I like it, I have it basically right where I want it. I am wanting to discuss something on this opening notch. As you can see, we have a point of contact at the spine, a point of contact on the top square of the tang square. I do not make the tip of the back spring meet up flush with the upper part of the open square on the blade. If you make that flush, once you put the back spring under tension, as I mentioned earlier, the geometry of the back spring changes. So if that square, say the tip of your back spring is at this angle, whenever you put it under tension, that angle changes like so, which will create a gap up here at the spine of the knife. If you want a flush, seamless looking spine, when it's not under tension while you're fitting it up, you need a gap right here. Now, I don't do a very large gap because I do want this to be a solid meet up, or very close to a solid meet up, after I put the back spring under tension. And I just leave the gap right here for length, etc., as needed. But I like that being a solid. If I have only had just a tip before meeting, and I have gotten some mushrooming happening right here because the back spring is a lot softer than the blade as far as temper. That way, well, as long as it can be springy, of course. I did want to mention that and point that out, that fitting up with it not under tension, leave a little bit of a gap on the end of the back spring so you don't end up with a gap after it's under tension. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. I'm starting to get close to the memory I have available to me. So in the next video, we'll pick up where we left off here and continue fitting this pocket knife up. I do want to thank everybody for following along in this series. I do appreciate it. And until the next video, y'all take care.